Well, a very good afternoon and welcome to the News Point here on ANN7 with myself, Stefanie Jansen van Veren. Let's take a quick look at your headlines this hour. After DA's court bid, now Helen Suzman Foundation and My Vote Counts NPCs have moved ConCourt over cabinet reshuffle. They want the ConCourt to set aside President Zuma's axing of Gordon and his deputy Mcebisi Jonas. Judge Bashir Valet under fire after the controversial explanation for his cabinet reshuffle verdict. The ANC says that the judgment is a clear case of judicial overreach. Party insinuates that the judge is playing into the hands of the DA. No let-up in service delivery protest in Johannesburg. Violence, looting and arson erupts in the informal settlement of Fine Town over lack of housing. The NSFAS funding protests on the rise. The Wits University students get into a scuffle with private security. Protest over NSFAS funding and accommodation issues. Well, after the DA's court bid, now Helen Suzman Foundation and My Vote Counts NPC have moved to ConCourt over the cabinet reshuffle. In the application, the two groups have asked the Constitutional Court to set aside President Jacob Zuma's axing of Pravin Gordon as finance minister and his deputy Mcebisi Jonas. The plea also want the court to declare that Zuma and the National Assembly violated their constitutional duties and to direct the National Assembly Speaker to institute an investigation into Zuma's conduct with a view of a possible removal proceedings against him. Well, Janine Ogle, MVC of the National Coordination, is on the phone line. A very good afternoon to you, Janine, and welcome to ANN7. Thank you for joining us. What are the grounds of your plea?
So what we are asking for is that the decision by the President to dismiss Mr. Pravin Gordon and Mr. Jonas be reviewed and declared unconstitutional and invalid. But also, we're very concerned about the way in which the President and the National Assembly have behaved with regards to this issue. And then also, we're asking the court to direct that the Speaker of the National Assembly institute an investigation into the conduct of the President and that it holds him accountable for the way in which he's handled the matter.
You say the President's conduct is irrational and unlawful. What is the basis for this conclusion?
So we are actually joining the EFF court case, and the way in which the markets have responded, the way in which the reshuffle and particularly the dismissing of Mr. Pravin Gordon and Mcebisi Jonas was handled, we feel wasn't handled in the way that it should be, and that's why we have applied to join the case.
Well, should this not be seen as an attempt to breach the principle of separation of powers?
No. So, you know, the case is also linked to the fact that the National Assembly has failed to hold the President accountable. So it's about his behavior, and that we are saying that the President has established a pattern of conduct, and that this conduct is irrational and unlawful, and that. And that the National Assembly should be holding him accountable in terms of the way in which he's behaved and the decisions that he's made, and that if and that because the National Assembly has not held him accountable, that the courts need to have oversight over the fact that the National Assembly has not behaved in the way in which the Constitution expects it to.
Well, thank you so much to Janine Ogle, who is MVC of National Coordinator, and she was on the phone line with us, just giving us their side of the story as to why they decided to go with the DA and asking for that court bid. Well, just reiterating the breaking news coming in after the DA's court bid, now Helen Suzman Foundation and My Vote Counts NPC have moved to ConCourt over the cabinet reshuffle. In the application, the two groups have asked the Constitutional Court to set aside President Jacob Zuma's axing of Pravin Gordon as finance minister and his deputy Mcebisi Jonas. Well, the plea also wants the court to declare that Zuma and the National Assembly violated their constitutional duties and to direct the National Assembly Speaker to institute an investigation into Zuma's conduct with a view to possibly remove proceedings against him. Well, ANN7's resident political analyst, Sifiso Mahlangu, joins me in studio. Very good afternoon to you, Sifiso, and thank you for joining me on set today. Well, what is your reaction to Helen Suzman and my vote counts actually joining the DA in their bid?
Good afternoon, Stefanie, and good afternoon to all the viewers at home. It's never been questionable that my vote counts. The Helen Suzman Foundation and Freedom Under Law are aligned to the DA. In fact, it was the Democratic Alliance mission to also formulate an alliance. And a political alliance is something like the ANC having a COSATU, a SATU, an SACP, a SASCO, or a SANCO. Those are the alliance partners, one in the educational sector, one in the working sector. They contribute to the mass vote and to the ideological pattern of a political party. The DA likewise has got alliance partners, whether declared or not. And the Helen Suzman Foundation is definitely an alliance partner to the DA. And it would have been surprising if the DA took this matter to court, but their views were never echoed by My Vote Counts and the Helen Suzman Foundation. It must also be memorable to us that Mr. Melusi Gigaba is in fact actually the first black young Minister of Finance in this country. Mr. Trevor Manuel, who was an engineer or who didn't complete his engineering qualification anyway, was appointed by former President Thabo Mbeki. Mr. Pravin Gordhan was actually not appointed by President Jacob Zuma. He appointed Mr. Des van Rooyen, and then 30 heads of business CEOs in this country sat with President Zuma and told him he had to remove Mr. Des van Rooyen or the rand was going to drop. In fact, he conceded and then appointed Mr. Pravin Gordhan. Mr. Pravin Gordhan always received support from white monopoly capital, particularly from the banking sector. We have that on record. He was very well supported. And I think many of us knew in this country that as soon as Mr. Pravin Gordhan was touched, axed, or reshuffled, the rand was going to drop. However, the rand did not drop as much as we expected. Mr. Melusi Gigaba did and is doing all he could and all he can to sustain the rand, to sustain the reputation of our finance markets in this country. But that is not without saying the DA will not attempt to have Mr. Pravin Gordhan return to his cabinet position as finance minister. And, they'll be joined by many other organizations, as we see now, the Helen Suzman Foundation and My Voice Counts. The issue here is that money in this country should be in white hands and should be distributed by white ownership. And for that matter, they had to appoint someone that they trust or someone that they want, who would not infiltrate the black business, would not make black industrialists, and someone who would not perpetuate radical economic transformation. And that person is not Mr. Melusi Gigaba, because Melusi Gigaba, even at the WEF last week, has been consistent to say South Africa needs radical economic transformation. And of course, then they want to take President Jacob Zuma to court, as they have. He now has to supply to the DA and the courts his reasons or his rationale for reshuffling his cabinet. But to your amazement, Stefanie, it's not the entire cabinet that he needs to answer for. It's just Mr. Pravin Gordhan and Mr. Mcebisi Jonas. Nothing about the other ministers who are reshuffled or axed. So, the gloves are off. It's about who runs the financial markets in this country. I mean, if you were to understand, 97% of the JSE is owned by white people in this country. And you think that's an alarming figure, but it's not, because they still want to hold South Africa at ransom and control the rand. And I think Mr. Pravin Gordhan gave them, the comfort that nothing radical was going to happen in this country. But Mr. Melusi Gigaba coming in and promising South Africa radical economic transformation has made many, many people uncomfortable. Many landowners and people whose hands are fully gripped on the South African economy are for the first time very uncomfortable, because this rand must now be spread throughout South Africa to the majority, which is black people. So it's got nothing to do with President Jacob Zuma at this point. It's got nothing to do with the reshuffle. It's got everything to do with who owns the rand. White people in this country are not ready for black people to become partakers of this economy. That's what it's about.
Well, thank you so much to ANN7 resident political analyst Safiso Mahlangu joining me in studio and giving us some of his thoughts on the story of today. The ANC has decried the reasoning given by Judge Value for his reshuffle ruling as purely political. Speaking to ANN7, a party spokesperson, Zizi Codwell, said the judgment is a clear case of judicial overreach. Not just that, he further insinuated that the reason cited by the judge is justification of his decision indicator that he is playing into the hands of the DA.
Within our view, judicial overreach to this extent is where the judge simply takes a political view and uses the court, the bench.
So you're putting it on the record that this judge works for the DA?
The fact that he agrees, I mean, it was very clear that the reasons provided, one, two, the ruling itself, it is political. It agrees with what was presented by the Democratic Alliance. Secondly, clearly in terms of the judge's reasoning, he endorses what we will call political co-governance. That for any president to take any decision, he must co-govern, or she must co-govern with the opposition. It doesn't happen. If you can have a judge like him, Judge Valli, clearly Judge Valli has an opinion, his view is informed by public opinion. And the public opinion, he talks about, for an example, that there was a perception in public that removing the Minister of Finance and his deputy because they were fighting corruption. That has got nothing to do with the issues of the court. That's public opinion. He's venturing already the issues that are in the public discourse. And I'm not saying he works for DA, but he agrees with the argument because his reasoning that they provided are now in line with, informed by what is in the public discourse. And the judges should always stay above, must be above reproach when it comes to their reason, because courts are final arbiters.
And it's not just the ANC questioning the judge's integrity. Mzwanele Manye's Decolonization Foundation too has approached SAPS to probe the judge. The foundation wants the SAPS to investigate Judge Valli for any prior meetings with the DA members related to the case. A lifestyle audit of Judge Bashir Valli. They also seek a probe into the judge's phone records, especially to save SA members. And finally, investigation into Judge Valli's bank accounts.
The utterances of Judge Mlambo that corruption is seeping into the justice system have now been given prima facie evidence. This judge, Judge Bashir Valli, has put the judiciary into disrepute. This judge has ensured that our well-respected judiciary is treated with suspicion. It cannot be that you have a judge that is supposed to know the law, a judge that's supposed to know the constitution, rules in the manner that it does. We must understand that ministers are not like employees like a DG where there's labor relations issues and what have you. When a political decision is taken, there is no amount of rationality that can be applied there.
It appears to be much more influenced by public opinion. Because if you look at the concluding part on the urgency of the application, I don't see what's urgent about the application. Outside that, it's much more generalization. It is not objective, and is coming to this conclusion. Therefore, the local standing to stand the test of time in the higher courts would not stand.
The deadline for President Zuma to submit reshuffle records ends tomorrow. The court had given the president 5 days to submit his reasons, and the records replied upon firing of Pravin Gordhan and Mtsebisi Jonas. The ANC has been clear in decrying the judgment and insists that the executive must take it on appeal. In strongly worded sentiments, ANC spokesperson said this judgment signifies unfettered and encroachment of the judiciary into the realm of the executive. The judge has pandered to the whims of the opposition. The DA wants to co-govern with the popularity elected government through the courts. The judgment is based on political reasoning and must be taken on review.
We are saying judiciary must not be thrown into politics by those who contested elections and lost elections, now trying to run this country through courts. Courts must resist that. That's what we are saying. It's a clear message. So we are living in a democratic country. So if we see a trend Now, in terms of judgments, we are free in a democratic country to say, no, there is a problem there.
The options before the presidency are the following. One, the president can comply if he chooses so. Is an exercise of his fundamental right to comply with it and disclose his reasons. Or alternatively, like Zizi Zodwa of the ANC spokesperson, which I totally agree, he should challenge that decision through his legal counsel. And I see it succeeding at the end of the day because it's going to make a fiasco and is trying to disember and trying to turn the president to a weakling.